Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the strange and unusual literature that I have found in my travels. Today we reach the end of one month and the beginning of another month, a month that I personally enjoy because the spooky season, the end of the year season, if you believe in the concept of time and yearly cycles, is one of the best times because you got Halloween followed by Thanksgiving followed by Christmas, time spent with family, times being festive. I would have had a great time being a pagan during the early years of human history, although I probably would have died of some preventable disease in modern times, so, maybe I wouldn't have had a fun time. That remains to be seen. But it's been a busy time here over at Around the Weird. My father died in August, which has made, reading somewhat of something I don't want to do. I have gotten back into reading, but I haven't been reading as much. And that's partially because my dad died, but also because my job has kicked into high gear. I work at a university in California, and the start of the academic quarter, the fall academic quarter has begun, and we're in person trying to make all of these things happen, which is very stressful. And not only that, but I'm also working overtime to make a lot of things happen and ensure that all the students have what they need to succeed. And so I don't have as much time to read in my free time. And unlike some people out there, I don't read while at work because, blending those two things together is very strange. Although I did read at my last job, but that's because I hated that job and I didn't care about it. So, take that as you will. But without further ado, let's talk about what I read in September and what I plan to read in October. So for September, I didn't get to all the books that I said that I wanted to get to. For a lot of these books, I didn't talk about them on the channel just because it was like I have so little free time. I don't want to talk about this book that I didn't enjoy or I don't have a lot of thoughts on. So we'll just skip that. So one of the books that I read that I didn't talk about was Batman Shadow of the Bat Volume 1, which was an entry that took place in the 90s. It was sort of newer, maybe focusing on the external events around Batman, introducing new villains. It was around the time they introduced Bane. And so the Volume 1 focuses on some new villains, focuses on Arkham Asylum. And to be honest, it's kind of boring for the most part. Like the first story in the volume, which is about the last Arkham, the last member of the Arkham family, challenging Batman and trying to get him thrown in the asylum. That's very interesting and it has a lot of interesting ideas. But the rest of the comics in the series, they were kind of bland and forgettable. And I don't even recall really what happened in most of them. So that should tell you something about the series. I also read Batman Venom, which is a comic about Batman failing to save a little girl. So he turns to taking drugs that enhance his performance, much like, the venom that Bane took. And again, this comic was happening around the time that Bane was introduced. It's sort of a prequel to that comic, although not really, but it exists in that continuity. And so I thought it was interesting, but I have a large problem with the underlying premise of the story, that Batman would do anything but feel guilty about those he fails to save, because he didn't save the little girl, but I don't he failed to save Jason Todd and he didn't turn to drugs in that, and he's failed to save tons of people in his career, but he he doesn't turn to drastic actions. And also the fact that Batman would trust a random chemist that he knows nothing about, just taking the drugs that chemist offers, like that flies in the face of everything that we know about Batman. So like they made Batman very stupid in this story, and it's hard to get into it when you know that this is not like the Batman that we've come to know already. It's a violation of his very character. I also read The Wake by Neil Gaiman. I thought it was an amazing entry. I noted in the video that I made that it was very timely too, because I checked it out from my library at the beginning of August, and then my dad died later in August, and then I finally got to this story after I was feeling in an okay place, and it really got at my feelings of grief and sadness. And I feel like Neil Gaiman had a lot of great things to say about death and how we remember people. And it's a really good volume. I definitely recommend reading it. Read the other comics first. I feel like The Wake is really good, like in terms of like waiting to get to. Like the other like entries are okay and passable, but The Wake really stands out as a shining beacon in the series. So worth getting to. I also read The Injustice Never Leaves You by Martinez, I believe is her name. I thought it was informative, but very bland. It reads like, as my friend Bevan says, it reads like a history book. I said it reads as a thesis, like she just submitted this as for her master's thesis, and like now she's expecting us to read it, and she just repeats herself a bunch, and it's hard to get into because of how dense it is. Like, she could have gotten away with writing half of what's in there, and yet she still chose to write 400 pages of all the same thing, like just repeating herself. And so it's really hard to justify, getting anyone to read that book or recommending it. But there's still a lot of information in there that you should know. So if you could find that information without actually reading this book, that would be key here. And so that's one book that I read for September. I also read a number of short stories in September. Leiningen versus the Ants, which I thought was fun. If it was also, a little colonialist in its nature. That said, I do recommend it if you are a fan of creature horror. October is coming up, so, creature horror is something that people are into, and you might enjoy that. I also read The Merry Month of May by O. Henry, which I thought was very funny, and a pretty interesting read for the month of September. If you are a fan of O. Henry's his Christmas story that I'm forgetting the name of, I'll post it somewhere up here. But if you're a fan of that, you might also enjoy this story. I also read In Cuba, I Was a German Shepherd, which was a collection of short stories primarily about the Cuban experience in America. And I thought it was a pretty good read. I didn't like it as much as other immigrant stories that I've read, particularly someone who's the Haitian American story that I read in the past. I didn't like it as much as that, but it wasn't bad by any means. It just wasn't my favorite. Everything Inside by Edwidge Danticat, that's what I'm referring to. And then I also read A Worn Path by Eudora Welty, probably my favorite short story of the month. Very thought-provoking, and it's very dense and layered. And Eudora Welty, like, either she intentionally means to talk about race or she stumbled upon it accidentally. But still, this story is worth looking at because of how you'll probably get a different meaning than what I found in the book. Like, there's many different interpretations of what the entire story means. And I do like the character that she wrote, Phoenix Jackson. So worth checking out in my opinion. Probably the one I point to most as a short story for reading if I'm going to point to any of them from the past month. And then I also read a number of poems. During that month, the month of September, I eulogized my father using the poems that I found. I do recommend going to my Poetry Thursday selection of videos and checking that out. Maybe one of those poems will help you get through any grief that you might be feeling in the future or even right now. So that was all of the books that I read for September. In October, I do have a number of books planned. Whether or not I get to those books remains to be seen. I'm hoping to, finally get at some that have been on my reading list for quite a while. But I've always just stumbled and missed those books just because I've been pretty busy with life and everything. In terms of books, I do want to read Endless Nights, which is the next volume in the Sandman series. I have no idea what's going to happen. It's just, volume 11 of the Sandman series. I don't know if this follows Daniel, the New Dream, or if it follows Dream himself, if it's one of those anthology collections, again, of short stories, which Neil Gaiman is really good at writing. I can't wait to find out what's what there. I also want to read At Night We Walk in Circles, which is by Daniel Alarcon. Sorry about that, but I think it's a Latin American experience book, so I look forward to reading that. I went into the library and it was like one of the first books that popped up in their Latin American display collection. So another random read that I'm hoping is pretty good. I also want to read Children of the Land, which was selected by my book club for the month of October. I think that's also about the Latin American experience. I'm reading a lot of those books lately, but that's only because I haven't read a lot of Latin American experience books in the past. So, I'm probably making up for that in some ways. I also plan to read a number of graphic novels, probably Batman themed, although I do want to branch out and find more. And I want to get to Beowulf for this coming month, as it is October, and we focus on the spooky, and Beowulf is about monsters and Vikings, both spooky things. And maybe I also will get to Dune. I intend to read it. It's just I don't have the time to focus all the energy, all the attention it deserves, much like the Lord of the Rings series. So be on the lookout for that eventually here soon. There are a number of short stories that I want to get through in the month of October. They are going to be spooky themed, of course. October wouldn't be complete without a story by Poe, so it's going to be October again. And one of the short stories will be the Oval Portrait by Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know what it's about. It's not as well publicized as his other stories, but given that it's by Poe, it should be excellent. I also want to read The Invisible Girl by Mary Shelley. Once again, we're finding that Mary Shelley has written things other than Frankenstein, which I'm excited to read because The Mortal Immortal by Mary Shelley was also really good. And so, go read that one if you haven't already. It'd be perfect for the month of October. Should be good. And then I have some other short stories planned that I haven't picked out yet, but I will find them in due time. And then I also plan to read a number of poems, maybe spooky themed, although it's difficult to tell. There's a lot of, scary poetry out there, but it's in short supply, or it's under a different type of theme somewhere else. So it's really hard to find those poems. So that might not be totally spooky themed in the month of October. It remains to be seen. Anyway, that is what I intend to read in October and what I did read in September. A lot of fun reads in September, particularly A Grain of Wheat, which I mostly read in August, but I'm counting it for September. Not a whole lot that really connected with me, though. I hope to change that in October, because I remember last year I read the house, that one Strange House book that was about, it was a different kind of haunted house, Slate House, sorry. And it was really good, and I hope to find something similar to that really, scares me and is very, thrilling. So yeah, if you can recommend anything good for the month of October, let me know in the comments below, or simply comment on something that I'm going to read and that you have thoughts about. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about my fabulous channel. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and spooky travels. Farewell.